Physical distancing is hard. As social beings, we've evolved to be in relationship with people and to be close with people. And we're all experiencing an absence of that physical connection we once had. And in my course, the Plan My Future coaching program, we're talking about relationships right now. And in my membership, Empowering Ability Club, we're talking about support. So I want to talk about the intersection of relationships and support today. And I think it's going to be helpful for you. Hopefully, there's a helpful nugget in here that'll help you with this relationships and connection piece. And just on a personal note, like I'm feeling this lack of relationship right now. And it's really giving me a greater understanding for what many people with developmental disabilities are known to experience on a daily basis, right? Research has shown that people with developmental disabilities have about 1/6 the number of relationships. So about on average 25 relationships, which is 1/6 compared to an average person. So just this lack of relationships, people with developmental disabilities already have this lack of relationships. And I think we're all getting a sense of maybe greater compassion now for what that experience might feel like on a day-to-day basis for people. And then I think that that's further amplified for people with developmental disabilities right now, that sense of loneliness and lack of connection. So today I want to talk about what we can do, right? And give you an actionable step. So what can we do, right? There's this huge uptake in technology, and I think we're all seeing it, right? The rise of Zoom. And there's many disability service organizations trying to deliver programming for people with disabilities over Zoom, right? Activities and other social things, etc. And that might work for some folks, but I think it's really short term, right? And it's kind of, it helps to maybe give someone some instant connection, but I don't think that it's likely that longer term relationships will be formed from these groups and doing this type of programming. And I might be wrong, but I really think that it's unlikely. So the way that I like to think about it is, how can we have more connection and maintain or even build longer term relationships? Because if you're part of this community of empowering ability families, that's really what we're thinking about. We're thinking longer term. We're thinking, over the longer term, who is going to be there with our loved one? And that's a big question that we're all trying to answer. And what I want to talk about today connects in with that longer term thinking. So how do we do that? Well, I invite you to think about who's in your loved one's network. And by that, I mean, it could be a family member, which would be, maybe a sibling or a cousin or a grandparent, or to think about maybe a friend, a neighbor, an old neighbor, maybe an old supporter that your loved one stayed somewhat connected with or become friends with. And there's the opportunity to invite them into a regular conversation. This could be a weekly call, or it could be every 2 weeks or once a month, but just a call to look forward to and to have that regular connection. And yeah, now I get it. We're still talking about technology, right? So we need to think about what technology might be best, because we're still in a situation where we're physically distancing. So video calling is typically best because we're getting the most human to human connection. We can see that person, we can read their facial expressions. So considering video calling, I think, is important. If that's not an option for someone, then thinking about, well, what else could potentially work? Just a phone call, right? Could we do just a phone call? And then thinking about, well, what would you do on that call? Well, maybe we're going to run out of things to talk about, or maybe a person has some verbal communication isn't their strength. So what can we do? Well, we can be creative. We can do things like read a book together, or look at pictures online together and talk about them, family pictures or whatever that might be, or explore a person's interest and look at pictures around their interest and talk about them. Or we could play an online game together. So we can get pretty creative on how we spend our time together. So we can just start with thinking with one person, right? And how can we maybe facilitate this connection between our loved one and this one person, right? And that's kind of where, support ties into this, right? I want to talk about the intersection of relationships and support during this time. And we don't have to do all of this on our own, right? We could ask a support person to help us set this up, right? Maybe starting with one person, but we could also start to build on that. It could be, can we help our loved one connect with 3 or 4 people during a month? And maybe help, facilitate that call with each of those people once a month or a couple times a month, right? So I invite you just to start with one person, think about how support might be able to help, and just try it on, right? And start, and then you can kind of keep building from there. And this has worked really well for my sister, and it's worked really well for other people that I coach as well. And it's thinking about, regular, ordinary relationships, and how can we maybe reconnect some of those relationships, but continue to build those relationships over the long term, so that people are going to be there with our loved ones over the long term. And this is an opportunity that we have right now. So if you enjoyed this video is part of a mini series that I've been doing on helping our loved ones to create a meaningful day during the pandemic. So if you haven't watched those other videos, you can go ahead and do that from watching it from the previous weeks. Also, in one of those previous videos, I talked about helping our loved one to increase their independence. And this is being a good time to help our loved one to do that. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can grab my free guide on how to help your loved one increase their independence. It's called The Ultimate Guide to Independence. And I've got a link for you below if you want to get your free copy. I'm Eric Gall. Together, let's take a step forward.